So, what does it actually take to completely change the way you see the world? We're about to dive into a pretty incredible 20-year personal journey that does just that. It's a story that starts with this deep, gnawing dissatisfaction and ends with a genuine awakening. Really, it's a journey from crisis to consciousness.
And this is where it all began. This phrase right here. Look, this wasn't your typical teenage rebellion. This was something much deeper. A soul level rejection of the path we're all sort of handed, you know? Go to school, get the job, get married, climb the ladder. That whole social script just felt empty. And that feeling kicked off a 2-decade search for something real. So, this first chapter in the story, we can call it the call to question. This is that early phase where the standard playbook for life just doesn't feel right, and it forces you to start looking for answers way outside the box. And this search started young, between 13 and 16, questioning school and religion. Then, at university, a car accident really became this major turning point. It brought on this stark realization that all the usual goals, success, status, they felt completely pointless when you're faced with your own mortality. And all of that led to a huge decision between ages 23 and 24. He quit his consulting job to just dive headfirst into ideas.
And this wasn't just some casual reading, okay? This was a full-on dive down the rabbit hole. He was exploring everything from game-changing movies like The Matrix and Fight Club to really complex books on evolutionary psychology and radical ideas like anti-consumerism. Every one of these became a tool to basically take apart the reality he'd been given so he could try to build a new one.
But here's the thing. When you question everything relentlessly, it can come with a heavy price. That intellectual search for answers started to unravel, and it didn't lead to clarity. It led straight into a massive personal crisis, a real descent into darkness. This was the first radical break from the norm. I mean, walking away from a good job at a consulting firm, that meant giving up financial security, a career path, what everyone else thought was success. It was a huge, definitive rejection of the script, a leap into the unknown with absolutely no safety net. And then he took it a step further. He cut his digital ties. Deleting all his social media wasn't just a simple detox. It was a conscious break from that curated, often superficial world we all live in online. It was a deliberate choice to turn inward, onto a much deeper and, frankly, much lonelier path. And this is where that mental journey became a painful physical reality. All that strain started showing up in his body in these awful ways: constant tension headaches, crippling anxiety, and a really deep depression. It got so bad he started experiencing something called sleep start. His body was so jacked up on anxiety that he literally couldn't fall asleep for 36 to 48 hours at a time. He was completely breaking down.
Okay, so this brings us to the absolute climax of the story. He's hit rock bottom. Every single attempt to fix himself has failed, and there was only one thing left to do. And it wasn't about fighting harder, it was about giving up the fight altogether. He tried everything you're supposed to try, right? Psychiatry, sleeping pills, antidepressants, but nothing touched it. The pills were just a band-aid, offering zero real relief. He was at the edge, honestly, feeling like a prisoner in his own head, ready to give up completely.
And then this happened. On September 12th, at his absolute lowest, a cousin gave him a notebook. And he just started writing one phrase, over and over and over. I'm enough. Enough is enough. Now, this was not some kind of positive affirmation. This was a cry from the very bottom, from a place of total exhaustion. And here's the crucial part. This act of writing, it wasn't about finding a solution. It was about complete surrender. He was doing what you might call dangerous writing, just filling the pages with pure rage, insulting his own ego, letting out every last bit of pain. He wasn't trying to fix a thing. He was finally, truly letting go of the struggle. And what happened next? Well, nobody could have seen it coming. This is the revelation part of the journey, where the real breakthrough didn't come from fighting or analyzing. It came from that very act of just letting go. So get this, just 6 days later, on September 18th, something incredible happened. He was in the middle of a totally normal conversation with his cousin, just talking about civilization, and he happened to say 3 specific words. And in that instant, his entire reality shifted. Those were the words body, mind, spirit. The moment he said them, he had an experience that his scientific brain just could not compute. He just knew, deep down, that there was a part of him that was more than his body and his mind. It felt like his spirit was finally saying,
Okay, you remember me now.
And just like that, his whole worldview flipped. One second, he's a scientific materialist. If you can't measure it, it's not real. The next, he understands reality as this beautiful interplay of body, mind, and spirit. The world outside hadn't changed, but his perception of it had changed completely.
But, an awakening isn't a neat little ending. It's actually the beginning of a whole new challenge. How in the world do you take a lifetime of logical, scientific thinking and somehow merge it with this deeply personal, spiritual experience that defies all of that logic?
And that leads us right into the final chapter. The practical, sometimes messy, day-to-day work of actually building a life around this brand new awareness. This is where the mystical has to meet the Monday morning routine.
So to integrate this new reality, he had to build a whole new toolkit. This included physical things like a super strict morning routine and intense exercise, but it also involved really deep mental work. He used specific journaling techniques to reprogram his subconscious, and he started doing shadow work, that tough but necessary process of facing the parts of yourself you've pushed away. And what's really fascinating is he even started using AI as a sort of research partner to help him bridge the gap between his old scientific mind and his new spiritual one. Now, the path forward wasn't perfect. Of course not. Months later, a familiar feeling, something like depression, tried to creep back in. But this time was different. Instead of getting swallowed by it, he was able to meet it with this courageous self-awareness. He could just observe it without judgment, which proved to him that the change was real. It had stuck. And this is where that 20-year odyssey leads. From that soul-level dissatisfaction all the way to this powerful statement of being emotionally intelligent, contented, and enlightened. It's just an amazing testament to the power of questioning, of enduring, and ultimately of surrendering. When you look back at this whole 20-year journey, it all pivoted on one single, counterintuitive act, not fighting harder, but giving up the fight. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In a world that's always telling us to push harder and take control, what happens when you just completely let go?